This is Reality Dispatch, written by Jim Mintz.
The matter was to begin in 48 minutes. He was 30 or so away from the courthouse. He kept a firm eye on Google Maps as the icon progressed along the freeway. The bus was slow, but it wasn't the driver's fault. The trains were on strike, and so everyone took to the roads. He cursed himself for leaving the house late. He didn't need that extra 10 minutes of sleep. He indulged himself. Jonathan was a courtroom reporter, a typist on the stenographer machine, and he wondered what his manager would say. Being late was not taken lightly, and there was a full listing of matters. All rooms were in use, which meant all stenographers were needed on deck. Here he was stuck on the 899 to George Street with no end in sight. "Get on the ground now," came the demand, followed by a scream from an unsuspecting passenger who had just been slashed with a box cutter. "Now, or the driver gets it," the passenger yelled. Jonathan looked left to right at the sight of the others, whether they were in on the joke or whether this was serious. He couldn't tell. His mind hadn't fully emerged from the slumber of 90 minutes earlier. He held the phone in his hands and was mid-text, and he wanted to notify his boss of the delay, but the inconvenience of this man had put a pause on everything. Then he shook off the confusion and gave the situation the gravity it required. His life was in danger. All of their lives were. The bus driver put the vehicle in a standstill. The maniac had the box cutter pressed to his neck. "Everyone on the floor," he continued to yell. Jonathan gave a good look at the man, and his brain lit with the recollection reserved for friends and family. There was an association there somewhere deep within his consciousness. He knew this person, but he did not know this person at the same time. The maniac continued to wield the weapon at the driver while he sat in his pilot's seat with his hands raised. Jonathan swiped the text away and dialed for emergency services, killing the call when he saw that 3 other passengers were on the line at the same time. One was halfway through a description of the culprit, the bus, and their location on the freeway. "Put the phones down now," the maniac yelled. The passengers took cautionary steps backwards towards the end of the bus, away from the danger. No one was taking his first request seriously. No one was lying on the floor of the vehicle. Then the bus driver began to scream as the first incision of the box cutter was made along his chest. Jonathan wouldn't know of the extent of the injuries until he read it in the newspapers 24 hours later. From this moment in time, they were serious enough to cause him to scream out in pain. The bus was firmly parked along the freeway, and the commotion of the violence on board was met only by the raucous horns of the disgruntled drivers outside. "Don't listen to me! Don't listen to me! Don't listen to me!" the man with the knife repeated as he approached the screaming passengers, all wedged up against the back wall of the bus like a can of sardines. One of the passengers began swinging his messenger bag, which was heavy enough to emit some force on the knife wielder, as he was using his elbow to block the blows, and found the force traumatic enough, he took a number of steps back. "I'll get ya!" he yelled at them, the elderly amongst them weeping with fear. "I'll get every single last one of ya!" That's when Jonathan remembered the face. It was in the eyes. There was nothing beyond the glassy look. That's what he remembered the first time he had seen the face. It was a murder trial, 3 dead in public restroom. Police had accosted the suspect at the scene and activated their body-worn cameras in their arrest. He gave off the same belligerence to them at that moment that he was in this. Jonathan was the stenographer. He suddenly remembered the sleepless nights he had for the duration of the trial, his request of a reassignment that was denied due to staff shortages, the introduction of the new management team for court reporters that cracked down on absences due to perceptions of vicarious traumas, the new management team that also took unkindly to late attendance, the wheel turning to a complete 360 degrees with this man, Mason Wilcox, responsible for all of it. Jonathan studied his face as he walked forward with another lunge of the box cutters. Something inside clicked. The sleepless nights had come at a cost, and his dignity assumed command. "Mason Wilcox!" Jonathan yelled. The man's eyes widened. He stood still, the voice of authority drawing force. "Drop the knife and exit the bus." Jonathan yelled. He kept the instructions simple and to the point. Mason continued to stand, perplexed as to how this stranger knew his name and confused as to whether he should obey. "Mason Wilcox," Jonathan repeated. "Knife down, off the bus," he yelled. "Now." Mason did as instructed and walked to the front door of the bus. The driver opened the doors with his free hand and kicked the assailant out of the bus, where a car swerved to avoid him on the road. The driver closed the door and returned to his seat, dialing for assistance that was already on its way. Jonathan watched out the backside window, along with the others, as a series of SWAT and heavily armed police engaged the man who stood there awaiting their force. He put up no resistance and held his hands in the air as instructed. It was as if Jonathan's commands were the voice of God, and those commands continued as the actual authorities relayed them. Jonathan could see on each officer the familiar flashing lights of their body-worn cameras, all blinking in unison. He wondered who of his colleagues would be responsible for watching the footage and pounding away at the stenography machines when this footage was eventually presented for hearing. 11 years had passed since the event. Jonathan met a partner and outlined the event in grave detail over wine and broiled chicken. It would become a footnote of their relationship, an afterthought. It was there but never acknowledged again. Its impact negligible. Neither of them thought of it from the point of conversation onward. He was the manager of courtroom services these days, and he attended hearings to relieve staffing pressures. He was in a particular matter where the evidence relied upon was CCTV from the cell room of the remand center. A belligerent inmate had provoked corrective services staff into using force, but only the prosecutor deemed their force excessive. They were arrested for their efforts in restraining the inmate, who suffered multiple fractures. Grievous bodily harm, each charge. With multiple charges, the prospects of successfully defending them seemed low, especially for a courtroom reporter with no legal experience aside from the hours spent transcribing events. The evidence was rolled out and his hands froze. He couldn't type. He watched the brutality being carried out and sat in wonder, the memory of the bus triggering an inner feeling he thought had died that day. The officers in charge sat there fuming at their actions being placed under the microscope. Jonathan could see in their eyes. It took the fiber of their beings, every single one, not to cause an outburst. He hadn't seen that kind of look since Mason Wilcox. They clenched their fists, bit their tongues, and pursed their lips. They wanted to lash out. Mason's face came into clear view. Jonathan was reliving the event in the courtroom. No matter how many hours, how many months and years, the moment was fresh, alive, and he was tasked with transcribing it for the records. But his fingers could not move.
For more stories of fact-based fiction, head to jimmins.substack.com.